Today's speaker is Erik Solivan from the Tulsa Housing Authority. And he's been in Tulsa now just 2 years, but I jokingly told him that it only counts as one, since one of those was the COVID year. And he is an expert in affordable housing development. He said that one of the most interesting pieces of his history is before he came to Tulsa, he was doing some consulting in Dubai around affordable housing. Has also done that work in Denver and Philadelphia. And Erik, you can certainly fill in if there's anything else you'd like to note. I'd also like to note that we have several members of the Tulsa Housing Authority staff on the call with us today, including Jenny Hensley, who went through a Leadership Tulsa program just a couple of years ago and had really reached out to help educate our Leadership Tulsa members about the project that Erik's going to update us on. The project's coming to fruition. We as Leadership Tulsa are very interested in the ways that our city is evolving to better meet the housing needs of our community. So Erik, I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to get ready to share your screen, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Wendy. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today on this morning's Fireside Chat. So I will go through just a brief presentation about River West and what our Choice Neighborhoods Initiative is all about and where we are today, as much progress has been made, as you can just see by this initial photograph. And also joining me on the call today is two gentlemen who I have the pleasure and the honor to work with on all of our development initiatives: Jeff Hall, who's our Vice President of Development Services, and Ken Keith, who's our Vice President of Construction Services. So the three of us together really drive forward our work in development here at the Tulsa Housing Authority. And obviously in close partnership with Aaron Darden, who is our President and CEO, and Darren Walker, who is our Chief Financial Officer. So as we skip to the next slide here, I'll show you kind of a little bit very quickly what THA strategic initiatives are. So first and foremost, it is Choice Neighborhoods. It is a $170 million redevelopment initiative that is bringing new life. It is creating and transforming the West Tulsa community in pursuit of our mission of creating a better Tulsa by transforming lives and communities. So the work around Choice Neighborhoods in Eugene feels is top priority. Second, and we'll welcome questions to talk a little bit more about the Rental Census Demonstration Program, which is the way in which that THA is shifting our entire portfolio of over 3,000 units to a more stable funding platform. We can chat a little bit about that. And then lastly, Envision Comanche / 36 North, which is an initiative that Jeff Hall has been leading in North Tulsa to transform our largest site, which is Comanche Park, at 270 plus units, over to an entirely new mixed income neighborhoods within the spirit of Choice Neighborhoods. So those are kind of our three largest strategic initiatives throughout the Housing Authority, a vision set forth by our President and CEO. As the next slide shows, I'll jump right into just very briefly, what is Choice? For those of you who have not heard about it in the past, Choice is a three-part initiative by HUD, the third evolution of how best to engage and reform our communities of low income, to create communities that provide both affordable housing for low-income families and individuals, as well as bring in market rate and mixed-use development to create a neighborhood of choice where residents across an income stream can come and participate and be a part of a community. So Choice Neighborhoods is, again, a $30 million grant that we received back in 2017, and we have been implementing that with our partners at the City of Tulsa. We thank Mayor Bynum for all of his good work that he has done, and his team and the various departments that have supported this initiative. Choice, as I had mentioned, is not just transforming communities, but also lives. So there is a heavy investment in the people and the residents of the community, both in the former River West apartment complex, which has now been torn down, and also Brightwaters, which is set to be torn down soon. So housing people as well as neighborhood investments, as we are working with well over 70 partners to bring opportunity to the residents to not only stabilize their housing, but create access to jobs, health, and education services. And I'll jump right into sort of where we are today here in the next slide. So phase one is nearly complete. Ken Keith and his team have pushed our general contractor Key Construction to be now 3 months ahead of schedule of where the anticipated initial completion date was, as well as being on budget. So we are about to bring on the final set of buildings in the coming 60 days for 76 total units, 22 market rate units, which to date, all the ones released to us from the general contractor have been leased up, which is great news for mixing the incomes of that community, and then providing 54 subsidized units. So this phase was strictly developed by Tulsa Housing Authority, and our future phases 2 through 6, which I'll get to in the next slides, were co-developed with our partners at the Michaels organization. So here, phase 2 just began construction a couple of months ago, bringing 72 total units, a $19 million deal of mixed source financing. I'm happy to get more into the details as to what mixed source financing looks like, sort of the complexities and the challenges of it, as well as to put that into the broader context of the national conversation around affordable housing and infrastructure investments, and how housing is a fundamental component of that infrastructure investment. And that construction is underway and is keeping pace. So phase 2 is moving right along. Next, you will see, next slide here, phase 3, we are literally, quite literally, closing the financing for phase 3 today. And that will bring on the next phase of units coming onto the site as that construction has continued. I note that one of the challenges that phase 3 has had and that we anticipate having in future phases is the ever-increasing cost of lumber as well as all materials. And despite those challenges, through good work and negotiations with our various debt and equity investors, as well as working with our co-developer, the Michaels organization, we have been able to close phase 3 and begin our phasing process for phase 4. So this initiative is continuing to move forward despite some of the challenges we're seeing in the construction arena these days, with the return, as we were talking about earlier, of life back to our economy and soon to be entering post-pandemic world. So as these phases all compound each other, phase 4 is already underway. So in the next slide here, we're already working towards, we received our next round of 9% low-income housing tax credits from our good partners at the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency just this past week. That's going to be kicking off our process as we're looking to shift our financing sources away from what we had compiled together for the first 3 phases and moving towards, for phases 4 through 6, a program called the HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, 221D4 loan program, which will provide better rates and help us better address some of the ever increasing costs in materials and supplies as well as labor. In addition to that, phases 4 through 6 will add a little more complexity to how we bring together our financing stack to the mix here for this deal. And I note here briefly on this side, as I had mentioned, Brightwater's apartments, that is next to be demolished. And that demolition will begin here in the next 60 days. The residents are currently in process of being moved out. And with that demolition, there is an existing subsidy contract that is received from HUD. That subsidy contract is referred to as the Housing Assistance Payment Contract. And we are taking that contract that applies to all the units at Brightwater's and essentially dividing that subsidy into the various phases that we are developing in 4, 5, and 6. And that's essentially bifurcating or trifurcating that housing assistance payment subsidy. So phase 4 is just beginning what is going to be a bit of a longer financing process as we're going through a HUD loan, but it's going to provide better rates to address our ever increasing costs. So just as phase 1 is completing construction, phase 2 is starting construction, phase 3 is closing on financing, The financing for phase 4 is already underway. As Choice Neighborhoods, one of the challenges as well as opportunities is that it requires our agency to move very quickly through this work. Next, as we transition into phase 5 and 6, which are our upcoming phases, also looking to finance those on HUD loans, also looking to receive potential set-aside awards from the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency to receive 9% local housing tax credits. That amount is totaling just roughly $123 million worth of housing infrastructure investments that the Tulsa Housing Authority, in partnership with the city, as well as our co-developer, is leading in rebuilding West Tulsa. And I will also note that all this new housing that is coming to the neighborhood requires a substantial investment in sort of the horizontal infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the electrical grids that surround and support this new housing. And that work is being done in partnership with the city of Tulsa, where they're spending nearly $30 million to invest in that work. And as we bring back this housing and bring back the residents to the community, we're also making community investments. We're in talks that Jeff Hall is leading with our various partners to potentially bring a grocery store to the neighborhood, as well as continuing to provide various social services, as well as job opportunities, economic opportunities to the residents as they return. Just over the last year, during this period of the pandemic, our social services team, led by UCI, was able to connect our residents to a host of resources to ensure that children can remain in school virtually, giving them access to internet as well as to devices to ensure they continue to have access to healthy foods through our food delivery program, as well as creating new opportunities as the adult residents return to reconnect with the ever increasing economic opportunities and employment opportunities that Tulsa has to provide. So we are not only transforming this community in its physical sense in West Tulsa, but we are also transforming it in terms of the lives and the participants and the residents who will be a part of this community. So that is Choice Neighborhoods in its summary. And as we continue to do this work, our focus is to complete this entire housing development initiative by 2023. And in doing that, we will also be kicking off some of our next phases of substantial rehab, as I had mentioned, coming to Comanche Park in North Tulsa, as well as continuing our portfolio shift away from public housing funding and towards the rental assistance demonstration program in order to better stabilize the housing authority's financing from HUD in order so that we can provide future investments into the housing infrastructure of the city of Tulsa. So that is our work here in Choice Neighborhoods. And as we go to the last slide here, you can see this is what our pipeline of investments and initiatives looks like. You know, today we have under construction over $81 million. That includes 2 RAD and recapitalization works. That includes at Sandy Park and Apache Manor. We have, as I had mentioned, in underwriting today, going through various financing sources. Our continuation on Choice Neighborhoods, as well as Country Club Gardens, as well as Murdoch Villa, scattered sites work, our in-house disposition, and then upcoming as we plan our future RAD conversions, recapitalizations. Overall, we're going to be making a substantial investment in both stabilizing affordable housing in Tulsa and creating new affordable housing for residents here in Tulsa as well. And Choice Neighborhoods is just a part of that global work of our mission to transform lives and communities. And so that is our Choice Neighborhoods initiative and how it fits into our overall plan for affordable housing infrastructure. I would welcome your thoughts and your questions today.
So I noticed that Miriam had her hand up, and so I'm going to let her ask the first question. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask it live, you can. And I definitely have a few questions, but if other people have questions, you can put them in the chat thread or let me know you want to talk. So Miriam, your turn if you want to unmute yourself.
My apologies, Wendy. I did not mean to have my hand up.
Oh, okay, so sorry. I thought you were very clever to find that button, which I don't know where it is. So, Erik, let me ask you, I'm going to step back just, that was fascinating about the way the financing for housing is changing over time. But I want to step back a little bit to the philosophy. So I noticed that there's two philosophical changes that I noticed in your presentation. One is instead of housing, sort of developments that you'll give rental assistance, and the other is this idea of mixed use housing, that it looked like about a third market rate and about 2/3 subsidized housing. And then I'm assuming you give people rental assistance to make choices about where they're going to live. Can you give us a little bit of information about how that philosophy has changed and why in recent years? Where did it start? And boy, I'm asking way too many questions, but you get my
No, absolutely. Without a doubt. So choice neighborhoods reflect, as I had mentioned at the top of our discussion here today, a shift in philosophy at HUD. So choice neighborhoods is the third iteration of HUD's attempt to address the concentration of low-income families in certain neighborhoods, not just within Tulsa, but in cities throughout the country. So what choice seeks to do in response to criticism of past, to Hope 6, and to prior initiatives before that, is how do we, instead of just creating and bringing back new housing that is more stable, more decent, and continues the affordability for residents, but how do we bring back a community of a broader spectrum of incomes and opportunities? What has been recognized at the national level is that concentrating families and individuals at the lowest of incomes levels isn't the best social policy for both its effects and limitations and the opportunities for the residents, but also the impacts that it has on the broader cities that these developments are a part of. So what Choice seeks to do is not only provide a commitment for all the residents who are currently there to return, but to build to a quality and a standard that would be open and inviting to all residents at the market rate level, so without subsidy, who choose to be a part of this community. And by bringing together a broader spectrum and diversity of incomes and individuals, we are creating stronger communities. Here at Tulsa, Aaron Darden, our president and CEO, has really set forth a new direction to create areas of investment that are not just concentrations of individuals that are lowest of incomes, but are concentrations of individuals across a spectrum of opportunity, so that these communities are not just existing as silos within our neighborhoods throughout Tulsa, but are a part of the overall fabric of housing and opportunity throughout the state.
Great. So Monica has I think it's a simple question. So how many new units are being created? So you tore down some, you're building back. Is it just different types of units, or are we actually creating more housing units?
So our net total creation of units is just about 100, roughly. So we're both replacing existing units that are there and then adding additional units. The majority of that additional added units are on the market rate side. So right now, River West, Bright Waters was all subsidized in totality. We are looking to increase, not only bring back enough units, so each of those residents has that right to return and the opportunity to return to access the new neighborhood. And we can open up choice by the quality of construction that Kent and his team drives forward that invites market rate renters as well. And that's where you see that third or so of total market rate units being added as new housing to the community.
Great. And then Karen and Kate have questions that I know were of interest to Jenny's class too, which is, first of all, as you're displacing residents from units that are needing to be torn down, how are you finding places for them to live? How are you dealing with their needs? And then as you're replacing tenants, how many of those prior tenants are coming back? And do you have a list of community-based organizations you're working with to find those subsidized tenants?
Yes. So to the question first about how do we relocate them? So we are required under regulations, both the choice program as well as federal regulations, known as the Uniform Relocation Act, to provide the residents an alternate housing that is of equal or greater both quality as well as at the same cost to them. So they provide either access to our existing portfolio of affordable housing units, or they take what is called a tenant-based voucher, and they go into the private sector and choose to rent in the private sector as opposed from us. So we're maintaining their housing affordability and maintaining the decency and quality of their housing. Each of those tenants also has, I had mentioned briefly before, a right to return, meaning they are guaranteed, if they so choose and maintain compliance with their leases during their period of being relocated offsite for the new construction to be completed, they have that right to return to the new construction. Globally, I can talk from experience from doing choice neighborhoods in Philadelphia, Denver, and other places. Typically around 30 to 40% of residents return to the new construction. We're hoping to meet or exceed those expectations.
Great. And I noticed Jeff Hall from your team has put some additional information in the chat thread that people can take a look at. The next question that I have has to do with, you were talking about shifting funding sources, and this sounds like it's your area of expertise. But talking to a non-expert audience, like how much of the money for these projects is coming from city, state, federal sources? How much is private sort of investment income, and how much is private philanthropy? Like, what's the mix?
Sure. So the mix, in order to get to what we refer to as mixed source affordable housing, creating what we refer to as the capital stack. What is the various sources from federal, state, local, foundations, philanthropy that commit to creating that capital stack? So I'll start first with national. So throughout the country in this space called mixed source affordable housing, it takes on average 3.5 different revenue streams to come into that capital stack that you build just to get to construction. So think about that. So in addition to your low-income housing tax credits, which provides the overwhelming majority of that capital stack, you still need to bring in a local source. Still need to bring in a state source from a housing trust fund. Still need to bring in a philanthropic partner to the mix just to get to your capital stack for construction or for rehab. So that mix of sources, and then spread that out over 6 deals across 400 plus units on 6 different phases, means you have to have a substantial amount of philanthropic partners. And we are fortunate to have that in both the Zarrow Foundation, the Kaiser Family Foundation, which provide up to 1/3 of the total amount of funding that's needed of that $170 million housing stack that we have put together. Our low-income housing tax credits, which is provided through the state agency called the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, they have set aside what's referred to as 9% low-income housing tax credits, which is the highest percentage that you can acquire, as opposed to 4%, and provides a substantial amount of what we call equity investment into each of the capital stacks, to the tune of, for each of the deals that are $19 million, phases 1, 2, and 3, RBC Community Investments, who is the investor in the 9% low-income housing tax credits, is providing $9 million plus of that $19 million total housing stack. So that is a substantial amount of investment. And then the federal sources, choice neighborhoods, the $30 million grant, we pull down roughly $2 to $3 million per phase you have your $9 million plus from RBC on the tax credits. You have another 2 to 3 million from Choice. That gets you to 13 million. You have another 2 to 3 million from our equity partners. And then you have debt on top of that that you have to pay from various rent revenues. That's how we build the capital stack to get to this finance. It is a niche practice, and it is a very complex process. And we are fortunate to just have a great team that Jeff and his crew leads, as well as Darren Walker, our CFO, and Aaron Darden, where we put together a team of experts who can help drive these deals forward.
I can see how complex that gets, and so fascinating to have this long-term initiative for Tulsa, and yet to have a 2023 desire to finish all these projects. That seems super assertive. So Michael has a question. He says, when you say they have the opportunity to return, do they pay the same rate they were paying, or is there a new higher rate for the new housing? And what's the difference in rate? And I would add, what's the difference in the rate between the subsidized and the market rate for these new apartments?
Sure, that's an excellent question. So the residents on their rights returns I had mentioned maintain their rents at 30% of their income. So right now, currently, the residents who are at River West, who were under the Section 9 or public housing program, were capped at 30% of their income. The residents at Brightwater's apartments under their housing assistance payment or HAP contract also at that 30%. When they return, they maintain that 30% max of their income. That is the max statutory level for affordability. So although they are getting a substantially improved brand new unit, which much more amenities, much more opportunities, a much better improved neighborhood, we maintain the affordability with a cap at 30% of their total household income. And to the second question is, as they return, and we create a quality unit for both residents who are subsidized as well as market rate, that delta between your one bedroom for affordable subsidized family as opposed to your market family. So that one bedroom may have a delta somewhere of $100 to $150. Remember that total rent payment on the subsidized end, it's 30% of the income for the resident, and then the balance is brought into subsidy, while the market rate renter pays the full amount.
So the difference varies because the subsidized is paying a different amount depending on their income. Yeah. I didn't know that. That's great. So, and Jeff has added some additional information, which is awesome. So as you are looking at some of those wraparound community supports, you talked about maybe employment assistance, other kinds of wraparound services. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's planned there? And then maybe talk a little bit about whether all of those same elements are going to go into the work in Comanche.
Yes, so in terms of wraparound services, so that is a very comprehensive set of what we call to meeting the needs of the residents where they are today. So as the residents transition out from the West or from Brightwaters, they may need access to basic employment opportunities or increases in their educational levels to get a better job. Or they may, in some cases, need access to childcare, need access to social services, to health services, to mental health services. All of that is made available and coordinated through our partners at UCI. So that way we can essentially wrap the family around with services as they transition out of River West or Brightwaters and then transition back in to the newly constructed apartments. That is the goal, that is the objective, and then to continue on in providing that service and access to opportunity by establishing a trust fund to support social services and the residents who are there.
Nice. And how about in Comanche? Are all of these same sorts of development practices going to be replicated in Comanche, or is that a little bit different program?
So that is the intent. One of the advantages of Choice Neighborhoods is that we have $30 million from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Right now, we don't have that at Comanche. However, we are looking to take both the lessons learned as well as the strategy of engagement with residents, and to bring that forward into Comanche. So similar to how we've assembled that complicated capital stack of financing in order to get to new construction, continue operations at the site, we are looking to assemble that same or similar group of partners to bring forth our engagement and redevelopment at Comanche Park.
Awesome. So my final question to the group, and then Jenny, if you would put in the chat thread, maybe either your contact information or whoever at the Housing Authority would be best if people have additional questions or ideas they would like to share. It'd be great if you kind of decide who would be best to field those about. But Erik, my final question is, you called it a rental assistance demonstration project. And that makes me think that there might be some research happening here in Tulsa. Do I read that correctly? Are we part of a research project, or why is it called a demonstration project?
Sure. So HUD has, in the past or over the last 20 plus years or so, test out various financing programs in order to create more opportunities for housing authorities to gain what's called more local control of their assets and find alternative ways to meeting their backlog of capital needs. So the RAD program, or Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, began back in 2013, and they have essentially been testing it out. They've released now on its 4th version of regulations for how the program works. So here in Tulsa, as Aaron Darden came in 3-4 years ago in 2017, we wanted to participate in that demonstration and test out how the regulations of that program would apply. In my work in Philadelphia and in Denver, as we looked at RAD and its various iterations, and it's now on its 4th iteration of regulations, we're looking to tap into that revised regs in order to maximize our opportunities to achieve 3 goals. One is, how do we stabilize our financing of our projects through subsidy? The public housing program historically goes through a process of what's called proration, whereas Congress every year votes on how much level we're going to fund our various $1.1 million public housing units. And that variation creates substantial challenges for our future financial planning, as Darren Walker, our CFO, has to do. So by shifting out of public housing and entering into a housing assistance payment contract, we stabilize that subsidy that we receive for the next 20 years. In addition, we are able to get title to our assets because it comes out of the public housing, it comes out of what's called a physical inventory control system of HUD, and we get title to it, which means we can now loan against the value of that asset, take a mortgage like you would with any single family home, and be able to leverage that as additional financing to rebuild and restabilize and rehab those units. So Comanche Park is going to go through a very exhaustive system of recapturing, reowning, reclaiming, renewing, and eventually rebuilding our assets there as we look to assemble that complicated capital stack in order to bring back those units, plus 200 plus more units in that neighborhood is the goal.
I love it that the cities are actually the research labs for the nation. And it sounds like we jumped into this project, not when it was so new that it was still untested, but early enough that we can help add to that. So Erik, I'm so grateful for you being here. Final question, and then we will wrap up. I think I've said final question a couple times now because I thought of one more, and that is, if people are interested in the market rate housing, how do they access information about that? And what has been the interest in the market rate housing in Eugene Field? Are you opening that up yet?
Yes, so market rate housing is now available. So Jeannie and her team have put together a great website. I think it's, Jeannie can chime in here, riverwest.com, which shows our various market rate units. They are great quality units. I can tell you, I spent time prior to my wife and I buying our house at the University of Tulsa. We lived at University Club, and the features and the amenities that we have at River West are comparable. I'll be very candid. It is a great apartment. And Jeff just on here, liveriverwest.com is our website to go and seek the market rate units. And I can assure you, if you look at the pictures, go take a tour, you will see a very impressive unit, high quality finishes. And know that your neighbors around you all have the same high quality finishes and high quality construction. So we highly encourage you.
The location is obviously outstanding as well. So Erik and the entire Tulsa Housing Authority staff that is on the call today, thank you for being a part of our One Gas Fireside Chat today. We have learned so much, and I am proud of the work that Tulsa is doing to create better accommodations and more affordable housing for all of our community members. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all in August.
Thank you.